The transport shuttle descended through the clouds of Sentinel Prime, its engines humming as it approached the landing platform of the Galactic Military Academy. Inside the passenger bay, dozens of cadets from various worlds chatted nervously about their first day. Some adjusted their uniforms, others reviewed their acceptance letters on data pads, and a few simply stared out the windows at the massive training complex below. In the back corner, a figure sat alone in complete silence. The armor was impossible to ignore. Thick plates of dark metal covered every inch of the occupant's body, from the heavy boots to the sealed helmet. Scorch marks and dents suggested this armor had seen real combat, not the pristine ceremonial kind worn by dignitaries. The visor was completely opaque, revealing nothing of the face behind it. When the shuttle landed and the ramp lowered, the armored figure stood carefully and walked toward the exit. Each footstep was deliberate and measured, as if the wearer was thinking about every movement. The other cadets gave her plenty of space, exchanging glances and whispered comments. The Academy's main plaza was already bustling with activity. Hundreds of cadets from across the galaxy moved between buildings, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. There were the towering Vorgash with their crystalline bodies, the serpentine Slith who slithered rather than walked, the tiny floating Cheetar surrounded by personal gravity fields, and dozens of other species. The armored cadet walked through the crowd and conversation stopped. Heads turned. A group of insectoid Crothery clicked their mandibles in surprise. Two Luminous girls, their skin glowing faintly with bioluminescence, watched with wide eyes. "Is that armor regulation?" one cadet whispered to his friend. "I don't think so. Maybe she has special permission? Or maybe she's just crazy." At the registration desk, a four-armed Crothery instructor named Calzith looked up from his datapad. His compound eyes studied the armored figure as she approached. He had seen many things in his 30 years at the Academy, but this was unusual even by his standards. "Name and designation," he said in the clipped, efficient manner of all drill instructors. "Cadet designation 7749, came a voice from the helmet speakers. It was feminine but slightly distorted by the audio system. "Assigned to Platoon 7. Calzith's mandibles twitched. "I need your actual name, Cadet." There was a pause. The helmet remained perfectly still. "My assignment orders specify designation use only, sir. Special dispensation from the Academy Commandant." The instructor's four hands moved quickly across his datapad, checking and rechecking the information. His expression was difficult to read, but his body language suggested irritation. Finally he found the authorization code. It was genuine, signed by the Commandant herself. "This is highly irregular," Calzith muttered. "But the orders are valid." He looked at the armored figure again. "The other cadets are already calling you Iron. I suppose that name will work for now. Barracks Bay 14. Orientation begins in 1 hour. Do not be late." "Yes, sir." "And Cadet? Regulations require full identity verification within 7 days. No exceptions." "Understood." "Understood, sir." As Iron walked away, two cadets who had been watching the exchange looked at each other. The first was Iris, a luminous girl whose empathic abilities let her sense emotions from others. The second was Kreth, a Vorgash whose massive frame made even the armored human look small. "What do you sense from her?" Kreth asked quietly. Iris's luminescent eyes followed Iron's retreating form. "Fear," she said softly. "Deep, constant fear. But not for herself." "Then for what?" "For everyone else." Platoon 7's barracks was a long rectangular building with bunks lining both walls. When Iron entered, the room fell silent. 30 cadets of various species stopped their conversations and stared. The only sound was the heavy footsteps of the armored newcomer as she walked to the only empty bunk in the far corner. A Slith named Wraith, his scales a deep green color, was the first to speak. "Great. We get the mystery soldier. Anyone want to bet on what she is hiding under there?" "I say war criminal." A feline Zarathi cadet named Mira shook her head. "Political refugee, obviously. Probably royalty running from an assassination attempt. Or maybe just ugly," suggested Thax, a massive Krogthar whose gray skin was thick as stone. His laugh was harsh and mocking. Too scared to show her face. Iron sat on her bunk with extreme care, as if the metal frame might collapse under her weight. She said nothing in response to the comments. Her helmet remained facing forward, giving no indication she had even heard them. A human male named Peter approached cautiously. He was one of only 3 humans at the Academy this year, and his curiosity was genuine rather than hostile. "You planning to sleep in that armor?" he asked. Must get uncomfortable. The helmet turned slightly toward him. I manage. Where are you from? Another pause. Classified. Peter raised his eyebrows but backed off. All right. Fair enough. Welcome to Platoon 7, I guess. The orientation session was held in the main training hall, a vast space with a ceiling that seemed to stretch forever upward. Commandant Sherry, a elegant Valorian with silver skin and 3 eyes, stood on the central platform addressing the new cadets. You come from different worlds, different cultures, different biologies, she said, her voice amplified throughout the hall. But here you are all the same. You are cadets. You will learn to fight together, trust together, and perhaps die together. The galaxy needs warriors who can bridge the gaps between species. Iron stood at the back of the crowd, her helmet tracking the commandant's movements. Several cadets near her shifted uncomfortably, maintaining a buffer zone of empty space around the armored figure. The first training exercise came that afternoon. It was a simple obstacle course designed to test basic physical capabilities while the instructors assessed each cadet's starting abilities. Most species had different strengths. Some were fast, some were strong, some could fly or phase through solid matter. When Iron's turn came, the entire platoon watched with interest. She approached the first obstacle, a climbing wall that extended 20 meters straight up. Without hesitation or warm-up, she reached up and began to climb. But something was strange about her movements. Despite the heavy armor that must have weighed hundreds of pounds, she ascended with fluid grace. Each handhold was tested carefully before she put weight on it, as if she was worried about breaking the reinforced material. She reached the top in 40 seconds, a respectable time that put her in the upper quarter of performers. The next obstacle was a balance beam suspended over a foam pit. This was where heavier species usually struggled. But Iron crossed it with perfect precision, each step placed exactly in the center of the narrow beam. She moved like someone who had spent years learning to control every muscle, every shift of weight. The final obstacle was a strength test, a heavy cylinder that needed to be lifted and carried 50 meters. The weight was calibrated to be challenging for most species. Thax, the massive Krogthar, had struggled with it, grunting and straining to complete the distance. Iron approached the cylinder and bent down. She gripped it carefully, almost gently, and lifted. The motion was smooth and controlled, showing no strain whatsoever. She walked the 50 meters at a steady pace, set the cylinder down with surprising softness and stepped back. Instructor Calzatha's 4 hands were motionless as he stared at his data pad. The readouts made no sense. 3 weeks had passed since Iron's arrival, and the rumors had only grown more elaborate. The mysterious armored cadet had become the most talked-about figure at the academy, not just in Platoon 7 but across the entire training complex. She never ate in the dining hall. Other cadets claimed to have seen her enter, take a meal tray, and disappear into a private side room reserved for species with special dietary needs. Whatever she ate alone, away from curious eyes. She never showered in the communal facilities. The barracks had private stalls for species who required special accommodations, and Iron used one of these, always during hours when the facilities were otherwise empty. She never slept in her bunk. Every morning, the blankets on her bed looked undisturbed, as if she had never touched them. Some cadets theorized she slept standing up in a corner. Others suggested she did not sleep at all, that perhaps she was an android or some kind of artificial intelligence in a metal shell. But it was her performance in training that generated the most discussion. In combat simulations, Iron demonstrated tactical abilities that impressed even the veteran instructors. She could analyze a battlefield in seconds, identify weak points, and coordinate team movements with precision. When her squad won 13 consecutive simulated battles, other platoons began requesting transfers just to avoid facing her. Her physical capabilities were even more perplexing. During a zero-gravity rescue drill in the training station's orbital module, a malfunction caused Wraith to spiral out of control, his safety lines snapped and his emergency thrusters dead. He was tumbling toward a section of exposed machinery that would have crushed his serpentine body. Iron had launched herself across 30 meters of open space, caught the slith with one arm, and used her suit's thrusters to arrest their momentum mere centimeters from the deadly equipment. The force required to stop both their masses should have torn her arm from its socket, but she had not even flinched. Wraith had thanked her profusely afterward, his scales pale with shock. Iron had simply nodded and walked away as she always did, seeking solitude. "She saved my life," Wraith told the others that night in the barracks. "Whatever she is hiding under that armor, I do not care anymore. She is a good soldier." But not everyone agreed. Thax, the Krogthar who had mocked Iron from her first day, had grown increasingly hostile. His pride was wounded every time the armored human outperformed him in training. He gathered a group of like-minded cadets around him, species who believed that secrecy had no place in a military academy, that Iron's refusal to reveal herself was an insult to the traditions of openness and trust that the galactic community claimed to value. "She thinks she is better than us," Thax growled one evening, his thick fingers clenched into fists. "Hiding behind that metal like we are not worthy to see her face." Four cadets nodded in agreement. There was Vorn, another Krogthar whose gray skin was covered in ritual scars. There was Kelix, a Zarathi whose feline features were twisted in resentment. And there were two Vorgash brothers, Drath and Kel, whose crystalline bodies gleamed with reflected light. "Maybe it is time someone made her show us what she is hiding," Vorn suggested. Thax smiled, revealing rows of flat, grinding teeth. "Maybe it is." The opportunity came 2 days later during free training time in one of the smaller exercise yards. Iron was there alone, as she often was, practicing hand-to-hand combat forms against a training dummy. Her movements were strange to watch, powerful strikes that she seemed to pull back at the last moment, as if she was constantly holding herself back. Thax and his group entered the yard and spread out, surrounding her position. Other cadets who had been training nearby sensed trouble and quietly left. Within moments, Iron was alone with the 5 hostile cadets. "Time to see what you really are," Thax announced, stepping forward. Iron's helmet turned to face him. "I do not want trouble," she said, her voice calm through the speakers. "Too bad. You have been hiding long enough." Thax lunged forward with surprising speed for someone his size. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. Iron sidestepped the charge with minimal movement, grabbed Thax's extended arm, and used his own momentum to flip him onto his back. The Krogthar hit the ground with a heavy thud that knocked the air from his lungs. The other 4 attacked together. Vorn came from the left, Kelix from the right, while the 2 Vorgash brothers tried to grab her from behind. Iron moved like water, flowing between their attacks. She struck Kelix in the chest with what looked like a light tap, but the Zarathi flew backward and collapsed, gasping. A sweep of her legs sent Vorn sprawling. The Vorgash brothers managed to grab her arms, their crystalline strength considerable, but she simply twisted and they lost their grips, stumbling away. Throughout the entire fight, which lasted perhaps 15 seconds, Iron was clearly holding back. She could have seriously injured any of them but chose not to. She was trying to end the confrontation without causing real harm. But Thax was not finished. Enraged and humiliated, he grabbed a metal training staff from a nearby rack and swung it with all his considerable strength at Iron's chest. The staff was designed to withstand tremendous impacts. It should have bounced harmlessly off her armor. Instead, there was a sharp crack. A split appeared in the chest plate, running from the center outward like a spiderweb. Warning lights blinked inside the helmet's display, visible through the visor for just a moment. Iron froze. Her hand went to the crack, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, her posture showed panic. Without another word, she turned and ran, moving faster than anyone had seen her move before. "Wait!" Thax called after her, suddenly realizing he had gone too far. "I did not mean to." But she was already gone, disappearing into the main building. Iris had been in the library when she felt the spike of emotion. Fear, pure and overwhelming from a source she recognized. She abandoned her studying immediately and followed the feeling through the corridors, tracking Iron's emotional signature like a beacon. The trail led to one of the maintenance levels, an area usually deserted except for repair crews. Iris found Iron in a small equipment room, her back against the wall, both hands pressed against the cracked chest plate. "Please leave," Iron said, her voice shaking. "Please." But Iris could see what Iron was desperately trying to hide. Through the crack in the armor, faint light glowed. And more importantly, Iris could see skin. Human skin, unmarked and normal. And beneath the skin, she could sense the truth that the armor had been hiding. "Your armor," Iris said softly, understanding flooding through her. "It is not protecting you. It is protecting us." Iron's helmet turned toward her. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You are from a high-gravity world," Iris continued, her empathic abilities letting her piece together what she was sensing. "Your people evolved where everything is heavier, stronger. Without that armor compensating, you would break everything I touch," Iron finished quietly. "Hurt everyone around me without meaning to. The armor has gravity compensators built into it. It makes me weaker, slower, safer to be near." She laughed bitterly. "And now it is damaged. How much stronger are you really? The training cylinder that Thax struggled to lift? I could throw it across the academy grounds." The 20-meter climbing wall? I could jump to the top. My bones are 3 times denser than standard human bones. My muscles generate force that would crush most species. Iron's hands trembled against the cracked plate. I came here to prove that humans can join the galactic community. But all I am proving is that we are too dangerous. Iris stepped closer, her luminescent eyes full of compassion. No. You are proving that you have incredible control. Do you know what I sense from you every single day? Fear. Not anger, not pride, not aggression. Just constant fear that you might accidentally hurt someone. Because I might. But you have not. In 3 weeks of training, of fighting, of being attacked just now, you have not seriously injured anyone. That takes more strength than your muscles have. Iron was silent for a moment. Then slowly she reached up and touched the releases on her helmet. There was a hiss of pressure equalizing and the helmet came away. The face beneath was young, maybe 20 standard years. She had dark hair tied back in a practical bun, brown eyes that were red from held-back tears, and a constellation of small scars across her cheeks and forehead. Not the scars of battle, but the kind that came from a childhood of learning control, of accidentally hurting yourself before you learn not to hurt others. My name is Sarah, she said quietly. And I am terrified every single day. Sarah sat on the cold metal floor of the equipment room, her damaged helmet resting beside her. Iris settled down across from her, patient and calm, her soft bioluminescence providing the only light in the dim space. For several minutes neither spoke. Sarah stared at her bare hands, flexing her fingers slowly as if they were weapons she had to constantly monitor. Earth, Sarah finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. That is where I am from. Most species in the galaxy have heard of it now because my people applied to join the galactic community 5 years ago. But the application has been stuck in review ever since. Iris tilted her head. Why stuck? Because when the galactic survey teams visited Earth, they were horrified. Sarah picked up a small metal bolt from the floor, something that had probably fallen from a repair kit. She held it between her thumb and forefinger. Our world has 2.3 times standard gravity. Everything is heavier there. Everything is harder. To survive, we evolved to be dense, strong, durable. She squeezed the bolt. There was a groaning sound of metal compressing, and when she opened her hand, the bolt had been flattened into a disc. She had not even appeared to strain. The survey team watched a human child, maybe 8 years old, accidentally break a reinforced equipment case just by closing it too hard. They watched construction workers lift beams that would require machinery on most worlds. They watched athletes perform feats that looked impossible. Sarah dropped the flattened bolt. And they became afraid. They wrote in their report that humans were too dangerous for integration. That we would hurt people without meaning to. That we were a threat. But you came here anyway, Iris said. 12 of us volunteered. We trained for 2 years on Earth, learning to move in standard gravity, learning to control ourselves. The armor was developed specifically for this purpose. Sarah gestured to the damaged chest plate. Inside there are gravity field generators. They make me feel like I am back on Earth, like I am carrying my proper weight. It slows me down, weakens me, makes me safe to be around. But you are still stronger than almost everyone here, even with the compensators. Yes. Even at 40% of my real strength, I am stronger than most species. That is why I move so carefully. Why I test every handhold before I climb. Why I barely touched Kellex earlier and he still flew backward. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Do you understand what it is like? To know that a handshake could break someone's fingers? That a friendly pat on the back could crack their ribs? That if I sneezed too hard near someone small, the air pressure alone could hurt them? Iris reached out slowly, placing her glowing hand near Sarah's but not touching. That is why you are always afraid. I can sense it now, even stronger without the helmet. You are terrified every single moment. Every moment, Sarah confirmed. When I sleep, I have to strap myself down because I move in my sleep and I once accidentally put my hand through a wall. When I eat, I have to focus on every bite because I bit through a metal fork once without thinking. When I train with others, I have to calculate every single movement to make sure I do not hurt them. She looked at Iris with exhausted eyes. I came here to prove that humans can control themselves, that we can be trusted. But instead, I have just been hiding. You saved Wraith's life. I almost ripped his arm off doing it. The medical scanner showed bruising where I grabbed him, even though I was being as gentle as I knew how. Iris was quiet for a moment, processing everything. Her empathic abilities let her feel the enormous weight of responsibility Sarah carried, the constant vigilance, the exhaustion of never being able to relax. What happens now? Your armor is damaged. Sarah looked at the crack in the chest plate. I have repair equipment in my private quarters. I can fix it, but it will take maybe 2 days. Until then, I will have to stay away from everyone. The compensators are still working, but at reduced efficiency. I am maybe 55 or 60% of my full strength right now instead of 40. Too dangerous to be in training. Will you tell the others? I do not know. Maybe it is better if they keep thinking I am a war criminal or a disfigured monster. At least then they are just afraid of what I might be. If they know the truth, they will be afraid of what I actually am. I think you are wrong, Iris said gently. I think they will understand. Will they? Your people, the Lumenis, you are empaths and healers. You evolved on a low-gravity world with abundant resources. Violence is almost unknown in your species. How can you understand what it is like to be born dangerous? Iris smiled sadly. My people may not be physically dangerous, but we can hurt others too. Empaths can sense emotions, but we can also project them if we are not careful. I once accidentally made my entire school feel my panic during an exam. 50 students suddenly terrified for no reason they could understand. 3 of them had to go to medical care. She met Sarah's eyes. Every species has to learn control. Yours just has to learn it in a different way. Before Sarah could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Both of them tensed. The door opened and Peter stood there looking concerned. Behind him were Wraith, Kreth, and several other members of Platoon 7. We heard what happened, Peter said, stepping into the room. His eyes went to Sarah's exposed face, then to the damaged armor, but his expression remained calm. Thax is in the commander's office right now, probably getting disciplined. Are you all right? Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward her helmet, ready to hide again, but Iris placed a gentle hand on her arm, stopping her. They are your platoon, Iris said softly. Trust them. Sarah's jaw clenched. She looked at each of the faces watching her, trying to read their reactions. Peter looked curious but not afraid. Wraith's scales had paled slightly, but he was not backing away. Kretha's massive crystalline form reflected the light from Iris's skin, making it impossible to read his expression clearly. I am from Earth, Sarah said finally, her voice stronger than before. A high-gravity world. My people are stronger and more durable than most species in the galaxy. The armor has gravity compensators that make me weaker and safer to be around. Without it working properly, I am dangerous. How dangerous? Kreth asked, his deep voice rumbling. Sarah stood up slowly. She walked to the metal wall and placed her palm flat against it. Then, with what looked like minimal effort, she pressed. Her hand sank into the reinforced metal as if it were soft clay, leaving a perfect handprint indented several centimeters deep. The cadets stared in silence. That was me being gentle, Sarah said quietly. That was me barely pushing. If I lost control, if I forgot to hold back even for a second, I could kill most of you with a single blow. Wraith slithered forward slightly. But you have not. You have been here for 3 weeks. You have trained with us, fought with us, and you have never hurt anyone. Even when Thax and his group attacked you today, you held back. I always hold back. I have to. Exactly, Peter said, stepping closer. That is what matters. Not how strong you are, but that you choose not to use it. News of Sarah's true nature spread through the academy like wildfire. By the next morning, every cadet knew that the mysterious armored figure was a human from a high-gravity world, and that beneath the protective shell was someone strong enough to bend metal with her bare hands. The reactions were mixed. Some cadets, like those in Platoon 7 who had trained alongside her, expressed curiosity and even admiration. Others were uncertain, waiting to see what would happen next. But a significant number, led by Thax and his supporters, reacted with fear and anger. She has been lying to us from the start, Thax declared loudly in the dining hall that afternoon. His chest plate was still dented from where Sarah had flipped him, a reminder of his humiliation. Walking among us like a bomb waiting to explode. How long before she loses control and kills someone? Vorn nodded beside him. My cousin serves on the Galactic Council's Security Committee. He told me that Earth's application for membership has been rejected 3 times already. They are too dangerous. They do not belong in civilized space. The controversy quickly escalated beyond simple cadet gossip. By that evening, official complaints had been filed with the Academy administration. By the next morning, representatives from 4 different species had contacted the Galactic Council directly, demanding that Sarah be expelled and that humanity's application for membership be permanently denied. Commandant Share called Sarah to her office on the second day. The elegant Valorian looked troubled, her 3 eyes studying Sarah with an expression that mixed sympathy with concern. Sit please, the commandant said, gesturing to a chair that had been specially reinforced after Sarah's arrival. Sarah sat carefully, her repaired armor once again fully functional. She had spent the last 2 days in her quarters, working frantically to fix the damage while the controversy raged around her. I assume you know about the complaints, HFY began. Yes, ma'am. The Galactic Council has been contacted. There is significant political pressure to remove you from the Academy and to reject humanity's application for membership entirely. The Commandant's silver skin seemed to dim slightly. I want you to understand that I personally believe you have shown remarkable discipline and control. But my opinion alone is not enough. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap, but she kept her voice steady. What happens now? The Council has proposed a test. A series of challenges designed to demonstrate whether humans can truly coexist safely with other species. HFY pulled up a holographic display showing 3 different scenarios. These tests will measure your control, not your strength. You will be required to complete them without your armor's assistance. Sarah's breath caught. Without the compensators? The Council's representatives insist. They argue that if humans claim they can control themselves, they must prove it under real conditions, not while being artificially weakened by technology. HFY's expression was apologetic. I fought against this requirement, but I was overruled. I am sorry. Sarah stared at the holographic displays, her mind racing through the implications. Without the armor's gravity fields, she would be at full strength. Every movement would require absolute concentration. One mistake could prove everything Thax and the others feared. When? She asked quietly. Tomorrow morning. The entire Academy will witness it. So will remote observers from the Council. HFY leaned forward. Sarah, you can refuse. No one would blame you for walking away from this. Sarah met the Commandant's 3-eyed gaze. If I refuse, humanity's application is denied. 12 billion people stay isolated from the galaxy because of fear. Because we are different. She shook her head. I cannot refuse. The next morning, the Academy's main arena was packed with cadets, instructors, and visiting dignitaries. Holographic cameras floated throughout the space, broadcasting to council chambers across the galaxy. Sarah stood at the center of the arena floor, wearing only a simple training uniform. Her armor sat on a table nearby, inactive and useless. She felt exposed in more ways than one. Without the compensators, her body felt impossibly light, as if she might float away at any moment. Every muscle fiber seemed to buzz with suppressed energy. The weight she had lived with her entire life was gone, replaced by a terrifying sense of power barely contained. Commandant HFY's voice echoed through the arena. The first test, precision. Cadet Sarah will perform microsurgery on a luminous volunteer, repairing damaged bioluminescent cells. The tissue is extremely fragile. Excessive pressure will cause irreparable harm. A medical table was brought out, and Iris lay down on it, her luminous skin glowing softly. She looked up at Sarah with complete trust in her large eyes. I volunteer willingly, Iris said clearly so the cameras could record it. I trust her. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the surgical tools. They felt like they were made of paper, so light they barely registered in her grip. She had to consciously prevent herself from crushing them. The magnification screen showed the damaged cells in Iris's shoulder, tiny structures that needed to be carefully reconnected. She began working, moving with agonizing slowness. Each motion required total focus. The microscalpel could not be gripped too tightly or it would shatter. The suture thread could not be pulled too firmly or it would snap. Sweat beaded on Sarah's forehead as she worked, her breathing carefully controlled. 15 minutes later, she completed the final connection and stepped back. The medical scanner confirmed success. The damaged cells were repaired, and Iris's shoulder glowed with renewed light. The crowd murmured, but Sarah could hear both impressed and skeptical voices. The second test, restraint, HFY announced. Cadet Sarah will subdue a violent opponent without causing injury. A combat instructor named Dravik stepped into the arena. He was a Krogthar even larger than Thax, his skin like stone armor. He was enhanced with stimulants that made him genuinely aggressive and unpredictable. Begin, HFY commanded. Dravik charged with a roar. Sarah had to force herself to move slowly, to let him get close when every instinct screamed to dodge at full speed. He swung a massive fist at her head. She caught his wrist, absorbing the impact, and felt her fingers start to tighten instinctively. She stopped herself just in time before the bones cracked. She redirected his momentum instead of overpowering him, using techniques that required finesse rather than force. Dravik was strong and wild, but Sarah had trained for this her entire life. After 3 minutes of careful grappling, she had him pinned face down on the arena floor, her weight distributed so she restrained him without crushing him. The medical scan showed bruises but no breaks. Marginal success. The third test, delicacy, Shea announced. Cadet Sarah will navigate the Crystal Garden, a maze filled with sculptures made from Vorgash shell fragments. These fragments are sacred cultural artifacts and irreplaceable. She must reach the center without breaking a single piece. The maze was brought out, a complex structure of delicate crystalline sculptures, some as thin as wire. Sarah's heart pounded as she looked at the narrow passages between the fragile art. One wrong move, one brush of her shoulder, and centuries-old cultural treasures would shatter. She stepped into the maze. Every footfall had to be precise. Every turn required her to calculate exactly how much space her body occupied. The crystals chimed softly as air currents from her passage made them vibrate. She moved like she was walking through a minefield, each step a separate decision, each breath measured. Halfway through, her foot slipped slightly on the smooth floor. She caught herself, but her elbow brushed against a crystal sculpture. Time seemed to stop as she felt the delicate structure begin to tip. Moving faster than thought, she caught it with her other hand, steadied it, and set it right. The crystal chimed but did not break. Sarah was 10 meters from the center when alarms began screaming throughout the academy. The alarms cut through the arena like a knife, silencing the crowd instantly. Red emergency lights began flashing throughout the facility. Commandant Shea's communicator chirped urgently, and her 3 eyes widened as she listened to the report. Training cruiser Delta 7 has experienced catastrophic engine failure in low orbit, she announced, her voice carrying across the arena through the speaker system. 200 cadets are aboard. Emergency protocols have failed. The ship is beginning an uncontrolled descent. Estimated impact in 8 minutes. The crowd erupted in panic. Cadets jumped to their feet, some screaming names of friends who were aboard the doomed vessel. Instructors were already running toward emergency stations, but everyone knew the truth. 8 minutes was not enough time to launch a proper rescue operation. Sarah stood frozen in the Crystal Garden, her mind racing. 8 minutes. 200 cadets. The training cruiser was massive, designed to withstand combat situations, but its descent trajectory would bring it crashing directly into the Academy's main complex. The loss of life would be catastrophic. She looked down at her hands. Without the armor, without the compensators, she was operating at full human strength. Dangerous. Uncontrolled. Exactly what the galaxy feared. But also exactly what was needed right now. Sarah did not ask for permission. She did not wait for orders. She simply ran. At full speed, without holding back, a human from Earth moved like nothing else in the known galaxy. Sarah covered the distance from the arena to the emergency launch bay in under 30 seconds, her legs propelling her forward in great bounding leaps that seemed to defy physics. Cadets and instructors scattered out of her way, some barely seeing her as she passed. The launch bay was chaos. Technicians were frantically trying to prep rescue shuttles, but the fastest launch time was still 5 minutes. Not fast enough. Sarah spotted a small repair shuttle in the corner, the kind used for quick external maintenance jobs. It was designed for 1 or 2 occupants and had minimal safety features. It also had the fastest launch sequence of any craft in the bay. That shuttle is not rated for emergency rescue operations, a technician shouted as Sarah jumped into the pilot's seat. You will die out there. 200 cadets will die if I do nothing, Sarah replied, her fingers flying over the controls. She had studied every vessel type during her training. She knew how to fly this. The shuttle launched 45 seconds later, its small engines screaming as Sarah pushed them far beyond recommended limits. Through the cockpit window, she could see the training cruiser above, a dark shape silhouetted against the planet's atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris as it fell. 6 minutes remaining. Sarah flew straight up, the G-forces crushing against her chest. A normal pilot would have blacked out, but her dense bones and powerful cardiovascular system kept her conscious. The shuttle's frame groaned under the strain. Warning lights flashed across every console. She reached the falling cruiser with 4 minutes to spare. Up close, the damage was worse than she had imagined. One entire engine section was gone, torn away by some catastrophic malfunction. The remaining engines were dead. The cruiser was a giant metal brick falling toward the planet below. Sarah brought her shuttle alongside and engaged the magnetic docking clamp. The connection was designed for gentle maintenance docking, not for matching velocity with a plummeting ship. The impact nearly tore her shuttle apart. Metal shrieked. The cockpit window cracked. but the clamp held. Sarah overrode the safety locks and opened the shuttle's exterior hatch. The wind screamed past at hundreds of kilometers per hour. The temperature was rising rapidly as they descended into thicker atmosphere. She could see the Academy complex below, growing larger every second. 3 minutes. She pulled herself out onto the shuttle's hull, magnetic boots keeping her attached. The cruiser's emergency thrusters were visible along its port side, designed to be manually activated in exactly this kind of crisis. But the control panel was 40 meters away across the cruiser's hull, and the safety line system was offline. Sarah made a decision that would either save 200 lives or end hers. She deactivated her magnetic boots and jumped. For 3 seconds she flew through the air between the shuttle and the cruiser, the planet spinning below her. Her trajectory was perfect. She slammed into the cruiser's hull with enough force to dent the reinforced metal, her fingers finding purchase in the gap between armor plates. 2 minutes. Sarah began climbing across the hull, moving hand over hand with desperate speed. The wind tore at her, trying to rip her away. Pieces of debris from the damaged engine section flew past, one piece slicing across her arm and leaving a deep cut. She barely felt it. She reached the thruster control panel with 90 seconds remaining. The panel was locked behind a reinforced cover designed to prevent accidental activation. It would normally require special tools to open. Sarah dug her fingers under the edge and pulled. The metal resisted. She pulled harder, feeling her muscles strain in ways they never had before. The cover began to bend. Her fingers were bleeding now, the metal cutting into her flesh, but she did not stop. The cover tore free. 60 seconds. Sarah's fingers flew over the controls, activating the emergency thrusters in a specific sequence. Not to stop the fall, that was impossible now. But to redirect it. To turn the cruiser away from the Academy complex and toward the empty training grounds beyond. The thrusters fired. The cruiser shuddered and began to rotate. Sarah was thrown against the hull, her ribs cracking from the impact. Pain exploded through her chest, but she held on. 30 seconds. The cruiser was turning, but not fast enough. Sarah could see the Academy complex directly below now, the arena where hundreds of cadets still stood watching. She needed more thrust. More power. She looked at her small repair shuttle, still magnetically clamped to the cruiser's side. Its engines were tiny compared to the cruiser's dead main drives, but they were still running at maximum burn. Sarah pulled herself back toward the shuttle, every movement agony with her broken ribs. She reached the control panel and rerouted all power from life support, navigation and safety systems directly to the engines. The shuttle's computer screamed warnings that she ignored. 15 seconds. The additional thrust was just enough. The cruiser's trajectory shifted, moving away from the complex and toward the empty ground. But the angle was still too steep. The impact would destroy the ship and kill everyone aboard unless she could somehow slow it down. Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She positioned herself between the shuttle and the cruiser, placed her feet against the shuttle's hull and her back against the cruiser's armor, and pushed. The force required was inhuman. Literally. No other known species could have generated it. Sarah felt something tear in her back, felt her legs threatening to break under the impossible load. She screamed, the sound lost in the wind, and pushed harder. The cruiser's descent slowed, just slightly. Just enough. Impact. The cruiser hit the ground at a survivable speed, its emergency foam systems deploying to cushion the passengers. It skidded across half a kilometer of training field, tearing up earth and synthetic turf, finally coming to rest against the far wall. Sarah's shuttle exploded from the stress, the fireball consuming the point where she had been standing. Rescue teams reached the cruiser 3 minutes later. The hatch was manually forced open, and 200 shaken but living cadets emerged. Some had broken bones, others had cuts and bruises, but all were alive. Against all probability, the casualty count was 0. They found Sarah 50 meters from the crash site. The explosion had thrown her clear, and she had hit the ground hard enough to create a small crater. Her training uniform was burned and torn. Her right leg was broken, both arms were fractured, 3 ribs were cracked, and she had a severe concussion. But she was breathing. Iris was the first to reach her, having run from the arena the moment the cruiser landed. She knelt beside Sarah, her luminescent tears falling on the injured woman's face. "You did it," Iris whispered. "You saved them all." Sarah's eyes opened slightly. "Too dangerous," she mumbled through broken lips. "See? Too dangerous for the galaxy." "No," came another voice. Commandant Shara knelt on Sarah's other side. "Not dangerous. Extraordinary." Behind them, 200 cadets who had been aboard the cruiser were gathering. Then Platoon 7 arrived, Peter and Kreth in the lead. Then the cadets from the arena. Within minutes, hundreds of beings from dozens of species surrounded the crash site, all looking at the broken human who had sacrificed everything to save them. Thax pushed through the crowd. His gray face was wet with tears. He knelt beside Sarah and bowed his head in the Krogthar gesture of deepest respect. "I was wrong," he said, his voice thick. "I called you dangerous. I called your people monsters. But you are the bravest person I have ever known." The medical team arrived and began emergency treatment. As they carefully lifted Sarah onto a stretcher, the crowd of cadets began to cheer. It started quietly, then grew louder, hundreds of voices from dozens of species joining together. Sarah drifted into unconsciousness with the sound in her ears. She woke 3 days later in the medical center. Her body was covered in regeneration wraps, synthetic casts supporting her broken bones. But she was alive and she was healing. Iris was sitting beside her bed, along with Peter, Kreth, and Wraith. When Sarah's eyes opened, Iris smiled with relief. "Welcome back," the Luminous said softly. "The others?" Sarah asked, her voice hoarse. "All alive. All safe. Because of you." Peter grinned. "You are a hero, Sarah. The whole galaxy knows your name now." "And the Council's decision?" Commandant Shara entered the room, holding a data pad. "The Galactic Council convened an emergency session yesterday. The vote was unanimous." She showed Sarah the screen. "Humanity's application for membership has been approved. Full integration begins immediately." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. 12 billion people. No longer isolated. No longer feared. "There is more," Shara continued. "The Council has requested that you serve as the first human ambassador when you graduate. They believe your example of strength tempered with compassion is exactly what the galaxy needs." 6 months later, Sarah Chin graduated from the Galactic Military Academy with highest honors. She walked across the stage without her armor, her injuries fully healed, her posture confident. The entire graduating class stood and cheered as she received her commission. Behind her, 3 new human cadets watched from the audience. They wore armor similar to what Sarah had once needed, gravity compensators helping them adjust to life among the stars. But they removed their helmets during the ceremony, faces visible, no longer hiding. Because Sarah had shown them the way. After the ceremony, Platoon 7 gathered for a final celebration. They had all been assigned to different posts across the galaxy, but they would always be connected by the bonds formed during their training. "To Iron," Thax said, raising his glass. The nickname had stuck, but now it meant something different. Not a barrier between Sarah and others, but a reminder of her unbreakable will. "To Sarah," the others corrected, smiling. Sarah looked around at the faces of her friends, beings from a dozen different worlds, all united by shared experience and mutual respect. This was what she had come for. Not just to prove humans could control their strength, but to prove they could belong. She raised her own glass carefully, still conscious of her grip but no longer paralyzed by fear. "To all of us," she said. "To what we can accomplish together." And the future stretched before them, full of possibilities, no longer divided by fear but united by hope.